Salutations and fist bumps, folks. Welcome back to the grid. And folks, today is huge because it looks like Marvel Studios actually brought back that old school Marvel magic that we've been waiting for a very long time, at least in the theater, because they might have just pulled off something absolutely massive with the Thunderbolts. Yes, I said it. It might be that this is actually big for the MCU. The movie just premiered over in the UK. The first social media reactions are starting to pour in online, and let me tell you, some of these reactions are a big breath of fresh air for this MCU fan right here.
Yes, Lord!
But the overwhelming vibe for everything is, I think we might have won. Like I said, this brings back that old, or it feels like this brings back that old school Marvel magic that we all love inside of the theater, and what we experienced a lot of, especially in theater with Endgame. And we might have an amazing movie on our hands. So if you are ready for this, strap in because we have a lot to get through. And as per usual, we have a whole lot to get through, not a lot of time. Let's rock. So for the people that have seen this movie, they are saying that basically this feels like a classic Marvel movie. Although for me personally, I don't think that everything has been all bad. In terms of the MCU, some things inside of the theater have been regrettably not as wonderful as we probably would have liked them to be in terms of the MCU and the quality, but it hasn't been all bad. And I've actually talked about that in an earlier video on the channel. If you want to check that out, I'll leave it right up here. But let's be real. This is exactly what the MCU needed in terms of turning the ship or righting the ship in the theater. Now, to kick things off, a review from Chris Parker over at 3C Films had this to say and dropped this gem. Thunderbolts is a real breath of fresh air for the MCU. Absolutely love the team dynamic. It's also rich with emotions, tackling pretty serious self-worth issues. Yelena carries the movie. Best part? It's 95% standalone and 5% setup. But that 5% though really feels like an old school MCU movie.
Yes, Lord!
Again, like I said, breath of fresh air. And the fact that this is emotional and Yelena carries this story, and that 5% I'm actually very much looking forward to. It feels like that might be a 5% type of setup that we got in Iron Man 1 from 2008, where, if you don't remember, Samuel L. Jackson showed up at the end for the post-credit to basically announce the fact that the Avengers are going to be created later on in the cinematic universe. That is exactly what happened. But check this reaction out from Wong Updates. They had to say, Thunderbolts takes the Marvel Cinematic Universe into the world of independent cinema. It is unlike any product that came before. Florence Pugh gives a performance worthy of an Oscar. By the way, an Oscar has never actually crossed the threshold of the MCU, so that would be pretty big. But going back to the review, the MCU is finally back and better than ever. As per usual, stay to the end for something magnetic. Independent cinema? Unlike any product that came before, I mean, again, Oscar worthy? Bruh, that would be huge. If the MCU actually got an Oscar for something at any point in time, it should have also happened a long time ago, a few years ago with Angela Bassett, but I digress. If the MCU does bring this over into the camp, that would actually validate a lot of things going forward. But as you probably know, my theory brain is already spinning and going to the far left corners of the MCU, like I just did a few moments ago. And again, we have the running theme here of Marvel is back. Again, that's inside the theater because there are some gems, as we saw with Daredevil recently. There are some gems that are around the MCU in terms of the series, but inside of the theater is specifically what we're talking about here. Keeping this moving along, Big Gold Belt Media said, Thunderbolts is raw, hilarious, and deeply human. It's a bold dive into trauma, healing, and redemption. Proof that even the so-called detective losers and disposable delinquents can rise above their past and become the heroes no one expected. It's gritty, emotional, and unlike anything Marvel has done before, a must-see story that hits where it hurts and heals where it matters. One mid-credit scene to expect and one post-credit scene as well. So that trauma healing and redemption that they're talking about is not shying away from the heavy stuff for this Thunderbolts movie, as we probably all expected. Now, in another video, these mid-credit and post-credit scenes could be huge in terms of implications that could happen in further movies, specifically in Avengers Doomsday. So you will want to sit in your seat for all this and actually pay attention to everything around it, because there's probably going to be something that is over in the left corner somewhere that's also going to be noteworthy that you need to understand. And if you are a fan of this channel, you probably already know I'm going to see it and tell you about it as well. And if you're not, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit that like button if you like this type of content. But going back to the reviews, listen to what Culture Base had to say about the Thunderbolts review as well. Thunderbolts has got to be one of the most unexpected MCU movies Marvel has ever done. Thunderbolts takes the MCU into the world of independent film. The movie is hilarious, dives into trauma, bold emotion, healing, redemption, and unlike anything Marvel has ever done before. Truly a piece of art. So again, that unexpected indie film vibe is coming through once more in these reviews. But what really struck me here is that it's being called a piece of art, traumatic and bold and redemptive. Again, because of the characters that surround this story, it makes sense because all 5 of them, 6 if you count Bob, are battling between themselves in some kind of way to find their way forward. And I feel like this movie is actually going to talk a lot about that from these reviews. People keep saying that it's totally new, different, but also feels like a classic Marvel movie or classic Marvel magic, which is what I'm looking for specifically. And based on all of this talk about healing trauma and emotion, this also kind of puts me in the feel of the last installment in the trilogy of The Guardian. A review from Tristan says, Thunderbolts is fresh yet familiar in all the right ways, a Marvel movie that deals with the themes of depression, isolation, and grief, all accompanied by a full realized century. Florence Pugh is stellar as usual, a scene stealer, and never fails to bring a captivating performance onto the screen. Amazing stunt work / choreography and production design as well, with some great directed scenes from Jack Shire, accompanied by stimulating DP work with Andrew Dross, and stunning DP work from Andrew Dross Polimo. Glad to see the technical craft on display from one of these movies that can very often have the visual flair of a State Farm commercial. I mean, you gotta love the honesty in this case, because a lot of these things, again, in the theater have been relegated to, in terms of the technical work, to just flash and flare and fan service, and then a few action moments here and there for the look or feel of the latest, specifically the Bateman commercial for State Farm. And then there's this one from Next Best Picture, which is probably the most critical I saw, but still leans toward positive. And they had to say this: Thunderbolts is in many ways different from other MCU films that have come before, and that freshness couldn't have arrived at a more opportune time when the franchise is in need of new blood and direction. It's some of Marvel's darkest material to date, dealing with the emotional wreckage of broken individuals, grappling with their past choices and finding camaraderie amidst the emptiness of their lives. which makes a whole lot of sense because of these specific characters that we're talking about, either taking on new lives like we've seen with Bucky, or trying to find a new path forward all together with the rest of the team. As we can probably tell, this is some heavy stuff that is going to happen in this movie. We see or hear hints of darkness with Sentry / the Void and Yelena in the trailers. So it's good to hear they are leaning into this while still keeping that team camaraderie, especially with the Red Guardian being Yelena's dad, go figure. But it very much belongs to Florence Pugh, who carries much of the dramatic weight of the movie on her back, while Lewis Pullman delivers a complex performance as a sympathetic character at war with himself. So it does sound like Sentry or the Void is going to have to battle a whole lot of things in terms of something similar to what we might have, or it might seem like something similar that we've seen in Moon Knight, in a different way of telling this story. Again, huge props to Florence Pugh, as it sounds like she is going to, or has been, like I thought this was going to actually be, a main story for Yelena in terms of how they were projecting her inside of the trailers. So my first thought in that regard is, does this also bring up the fact that she has to deal with the loss of her sister, and that she now also probably has to clean some red out of her ledger as well, and the fact that there's, at least from what we know since Brave New World, there's another widow that is walking around on the MCU Earth as well. Like, all of that stuff, is she coming to grips with all of that and more? Or is she also coming to grips with that and now understanding that she is going to have to be the leader of this group? But overall, the reactions so far have, at least from what I've heard and seen, have been amazing. And I'm so excited to see this movie. This is a big step for Marvel Studios in terms of the in-theater reactions and all that kind of stuff. It's a big step forward, I should say, for Marvel Studios in terms of the in-theater excitement and in-theater movie magic that we all know and love, or have come to know and love from the MCU. But the big elephant in the room is the fact that we have zero, none, absolute zero, none, zilch, nothing for a type of setup for Avengers Doomsday, specifically in the character of Doctor Doom. And let's be honest, we need that. So it kind of feels like there's some setup that's going to happen going into the next installment of everything in terms of Sentry and Doomsday. Look, obviously we have to watch the movie for ourselves, go in with an open mind, because let's be honest, a whole lot of us didn't really expect a lot from this movie in general. Probably, at least I know I didn't when it first got announced. Thought it was going to be another setup movie for Avengers and all that kind of stuff, but it feels like this is going to have some actual weight to it. But seeing this kind of reaction, I'm excited now to actually go and see this when it hits theaters. And if it's any consolation, it's also a good thing for the upcoming movies in Fantastic Four, Avengers Doomsday, and Secret Wars as well, because there's going to more than likely be some setup that is going to happen around this movie going forward into the other ones. But folks, that's pretty much all that I found in terms of the early reactions to the Thunderbolts movie. What do you think? Leave that down in the comments. And if you're new around here and you like this type of content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Love to have you on the fam. And until next time, y'all be smooth. Blurred out.